hard problem of consciousness and how can we approach to it. So our path of this consciousness research has been so far to build up many different kind of empirical experimental paradigms. And in particular, last week, we have talked about attention versus consciousness approach. And then a couple of weeks ago, we talked about whether B1 is in the NCC or not. And then likewise, we can talk about whether the prefrontal cortex is related to the NCC and so on. And then that's basically the approach to map the neural correlates of consciousness. And these are, according to some philosophers, called easy problems, in the sense that explain the observable behaviors, such as the reports and so on, from the neural activities and what they are correlated and so on. And then eventually it tries to find the strongest correlational evidence between the consciousness and the neural activities. And but that is the kind of the problem that has been called as a hard problem of consciousness. Basically, when there is even if you find some kind of neural correlates of consciousness, this arrow from neural correlates of consciousness to particular conscious experience, this arrow is very difficult to establish. That's the point. And it's the problem that is proposed by most famously David Chalmers. He's a philosopher, and he says his argument is based on some of the mathematical, the philosophical arguments and thought experiments, and also logical experiments, such as a philosophical zombie argument or inverted quality argument or knowledge argument and things like that, that I'm not going to into the detail. And basically, as long as you can imagine a zombie system that is exactly the same as myself from not only the appearance or behavior, but every molecules and the atoms that I constitute myself, and even the states of the molecules and atoms, including quantum states and things like that. If both two systems are completely identical from all the physical laws, and still we can imagine, okay, it's not proof. Imagine logically possible to think about that one of them is completely conscious like myself, but the other one is not, then this kind of correlational argument just doesn't hold, because even if you fix everything, there is a room for logic or imagination to escape from one or the other. And if you're convinced by that kind of argument, maybe it's the case, it's true that it's true that explaining how and certain neural activity must give rise to consciousness is a really hard problem. And why do we perceive faces or color motion when we stimulate our neurons in the FFA or V8 or MD that I described over the last couple of weeks? It is really weird, in fact. After looking through all these evidence of the neural activity and the correlates and so on, why do these particular neurons or particular areas have to be related to particular conscious experiences? Not really easy to imagine if we extend this mapping the NCC type approach, right? Why not in the frontal, or why it is in frontal? Why it's not in the B1, or why it is there? Why in some cases attention is necessary and why it's not? That needs to be, in a sense, coherently explained. But as long as we are doing this kind of correlation type analysis, it may not be easy to get there. That's the point. On the other hand, the third alternative that I'm going to discuss today is potentially something that we can in a sense approach to this hard problem. So imagine that the hard problem is on top of this mountain, as I depicted here, and then if as an empirical science, building from the brain activity or behavior from bottom, and then you try to climb up the mountain. and then to eventually arrive at the summit of the hard problem. But what Chalmers has been saying is that oh, there is actually a barrier, significant barrier or gap that no human can actually bridge or go across. Just between hard problem and mapping of the complete MCC. It's just logically impossible to go through this barrier. That's the hard problem. And here comes this different kind of idea. Integrated information theory is like a helicopter, and proposed by Giulio Tononi in this figure. It's not like it may be true that I don't know whether it's going to be true or not. Going from the brain and also behavior to reach the hard problem is not possible. But if you attack the summit from completely different direction, it may be just possible to at least approach to hard problem. So in essence, what IIT tries to do is to come up with an explanation of how our conscious phenomenology can be supported by the physical mechanism. So it's the arrow is now reversed from this kind of schematics. Going from left to right is difficult or hard, but maybe starting from the right side and then to go back to the left side is potentially possible. That's the integrated information pathway. So in summary, in fact, if we start from the observation of the neural activity, then it may be the case that we end up with explaining easy problems on how stimuli or reports correlate with the conscious reports. And then correlate with a particular brain activity. And then that's basically leads to the hard problem. You can't do much above and beyond that. And then we just can't explain anything about the difference between vision and also audition, or something like why do we need to experience things without stimulus and reports. So an alternative theoretical option is to start from the phenomenological side rather than from the neural activity side. And there, first thing we need to do is to identify what is the essential properties of consciousness. And in the next video, we'll start from the what IIT proposes as the essential properties.